Hello, and welcome to our podcast, Perfectly Human, the podcast that helps you feel that we are all connected and whatever you're experiencing is perfectly human. My name is Angie, and I'm one of your hosts today.
And I'm Rekha, the other host for today.
Yes. So today's podcast is called Unhappy Whiny People. And I don't know if you recognize that title, but we are being a little bit cheeky as usual, right, Rekha?
Yes, I love the actual song. What is it called? Shiny Happy People, isn't it?
Shiny happy people, yes, the REM
Yeah.
song. For all of
Yeah.
those of you who are non-millennial, although maybe if you're millennial, maybe you have still heard it. Where we Today we're going to discuss something very topical as we are leading up to Christmas. We are going to discuss toxic relationships. We're going to talk a little bit about how they look like. But most importantly, we're also going to give you some strategies and ideas on how we can manage them. The key thing here is that we are talking about relationships and behavior. We don't like, or we didn't want to sort of really talk about toxic people as in giving them a permanent label. So yes, we're talking about relationships and behavior. So why have we chosen this topic? So I just said, obviously, that with the run up to Christmas, a lot of us are going to spend time with family and friends. And for some people, this is really like difficult. It's a difficult time. Well, families can always be interesting, actually, and family dynamics.
I think
um
interesting is a good word, Angie.
yeah, we like this word from the beginning anyway. But yes, in this episode, though, we are going to focus on relationships with families and friends, or colleagues, but we're not going to talk so much specifically about work, let's say. But yes, we wanted to explore this subject and help you listeners feel that it's okay to talk about this. So as usual, we are bringing something to you that we feel it's okay to talk about. Basically, we don't live in a bubble. We have to work and interact with others. We have to live with others. Christmas is lots of fun, but it can also be a little bit stressful sometimes. So Reka, yes, tell us what is this toxic relationships and behavior that we're talking about.
Well, I think one of the things that I really wanted to kind of just flag was when we started talking about this topic, both of us were like, oh my God, like I've been in that type of relationship or I've been in that type of relationship. And it's really interesting because as I've been talking to people, I think so many people can relate to this. So I think, I mean, and I think when we were talking, I was thinking of a toxic relationship I had with a friend at high school. So it kind of took me back many years. And this particular friend, and I didn't realize it at the time, but she just kept on like with these subtle put downs.
Mm.
Like she would say quite mean things, and I would just kind of brush them off. But then it kind of became very frequent. And I mean, we're not friends anymore, but I
Mm.
think at the time
That,
I
that
did
that
tolerate.
says something about it. Sorry.
Well, the reason why we're not friends anymore is a long story, which I won't go into. But I think I actually ended up being friends with her for a very long time and being in quite an unhealthy relationship with her because she would say quite mean things to me, and in a kind of flippant way, and I would just kind of brush them off. And so for me, I think that was one toxic relationship that I can think about and I remembered, and there are many others, but that was one particular one that I realized that was quite toxic. I don't know about you. What about you, Angie?
For me, I remember a few years ago, but not so long ago, starting the year being intentional about letting go of toxic relationships in my life. And the one example that I'm thinking about was a bit of a really an imbalanced relationship. Lots of us are either very people kind of focused or not so much. And I am people focused, and what I realized is that with this person, I was always the one looking out for them, like calling them, or like I was the one really feeding the relationship, basically.
Mm,
um And actually, what happened is I just decided, well, this person never calls me, never kind of checks on me, etc. So I decided to just not call this person anymore.
Mm,
And what happened? And surely enough, a few months later, this person was like, "Oh, we haven't met in a while. Like, we haven't spoken." But they also didn't say, "Oh, let's go and have a coffee." Like,
yeah,
whole thing kind of died off, basically.
yeah,
And I was a bit like, well, why do I need to sustain so many relationships
yeah.
um, that maybe,
One-sided.
yes,
Yeah,
they are.
imbalanced. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. One-sided. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I guess, I get, toxic relationships could be in different shapes and forms. And I guess, I think if I was to say, what is a toxic relationship, I think it would be like a relationship where you've got different levels of it, right? So you've got one where your well-being is feeling threatened in some way, whether it's emotional, physical, or psychological. So, that would be extreme kind of toxic relationship where there may be signs of abuse, whether it's physical or emotional and psychological.
Mm,
But I guess more on a daily kind of basic level, I think it would be any relationship that makes you feel worse rather
mm,
than better.
yeah.
So a relationship that kind of pulls you down as opposed to lifts you up.
Mm,
And these can, as you mentioned before, it could be relationships with your family, and it could be in any context from the playground to the boardroom to the bedroom. I think those things, it's important to think about. It's not kind of isolated in certain situations. And so I think one of the things that would be great to talk about is, what are some toxic behaviors? Because as I was saying to you earlier
mm.
about my friend, I was in that relationship with her for many years without even knowing that she wasn't
So
very
it's
good for me.
like, how do we recognize it? Let's say, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, I think maybe it might be useful for me to just outline some types of toxic behaviors. And the reason we're saying behaviors is, you, as you were saying, you don't want to say toxic person, because a behavior is something we can change. We can, when we get feedback on it, we can shift it. And often, sometimes people may not even know that their behavior is impacting you in a negative way. And so I think that's really important to think about. So I guess here is, some subtle cues. One of them, which I think is I see in some people, is constant complaining or criticism. So where people are kind of never happy with the situation, and you're constantly having to make sure that they're okay. And that's kind of exhausting. So that's one of them. The other one I would say is being manipulated.
Mm.
This one's an interesting one. Sometimes we don't even know it's happening. And
Yeah, I
I
was going to
actually
say
noticed,
exactly that.
yeah,
Yes, it's very difficult
yeah.
to know that you are being manipulated. Actually. Mm.
Completely. And actually, I picked up on this recently with my parents. And I think I spoke to my sister about it. And I was like, oh, I'm just being manipulated to do something I don't want to do. And so that, I think, is something to look out for. And sometimes, I mean, it can be, the manipulation can be from cultural expectations as well, and gender, expectations. And I find that sometimes pulls on me. Oh, like, but you should do this. You've always done that, and that's what's expected. So being manipulated, I think, is one to look out for, and sometimes that can be really subtle. So it's kind of keeping an eye out for that. One of them that I love, I don't love, but I loved having a word for it, was
Mm.
stonewalling. And
Mm.
Angie, you know what that one means? Or have
Yes,
you
yes.
experienced that before?
I have been in the on the receiving end of it as well. Yes, but yes,
Oh,
putting
really?
some words to describe something is very critical, because sometimes you don't recognize it until you have this language to describe it, basically. But
Yeah,
yes, tell us
yeah.
what is stonewalling? Telling us, tell us.
So basically, it's when, and I didn't know this until I came across it in one of these reality TV shows, actually. And it was when you say you upset me, for example, and then we have an argument, but then you just completely just ignore me. You cut me off, you shut me down, and you basically just ignore. And that's really hard to deal with sometimes. And actually, one of the things I realized is my husband used to do that when we would argue, because he would just like, I can't deal with this, and he would just stonewall me. And I found it really difficult. And when I actually had a word to describe it, we talked about it. And it's not something he did maliciously. I guess it was just his coping mechanism, but it was not making me feel very good. And so being able to have the language really helped around
Yes.
that.
It's a difficult one because sometimes, and in relationships, and I'm going to go a little bit off here, but in relationships, sometimes one person is more ready to talk immediately than the other.
Yes.
So it's difficult to, so for the person who's not ready to talk about it, you rather say, I'm not ready to talk about it now.
Right.
But then this going into the stonewalling is what is actually difficult for the receiving end, basically. Yes. Sorry.
No, and I agree with you, because now, like, if me and my husband have an argument, we either of us, and then he would say, can we talk about this tomorrow?
Yeah.
And so it's it's a better way, as opposed to just being completely shut out.
Yes.
And I'm quite I get quite anxious with relationships, in the sense that I'm like, oh, do you still like me? Or and that's my own insecurity. But if somebody shuts me out, it's actually really not healthy for me, and I struggle with that. So
Yes.
stonewalling is an interesting one, and I think one that I found it really useful to put a label to. The other one I want to talk about is narcissism. When this person, it's all about them. It's all about what they want to do, and also with that, they tend to put others down to help themselves feel better, which kind of reminds me of that friend I was talking about in high school. So narcissism is something that I have experienced and seen around me, and maybe listeners have experienced the same. And there's a great book around that, which is called Surrounded by Psychopaths. I don't know if you've read
I
that.
love that title. I love that title.
Yeah, but it's actually a really interesting book, and it talks about, it helped me identify some toxic behaviors that you see in people, and even in myself. There are times where I've probably done things as well. So narcissism, where it's kind of all about them, all about what they want to do, and it's about they're grandiose. And the other one is walking on eggshells. So feeling like you have to walk on eggshell out of fear of getting into an argument with this person. So are they going to kick off? Is it going to be a very blown up argument if you do X, Y, and Z? So you're constantly having to watch what you say and do, and that can be quite exhausting. And then lastly, really, just everything that goes wrong is your fault. So that they turn things around, and not look at the part they play, and that can be very exhausting. And I probably have been the one who has always blamed other people and not looked at myself. And I can see that, as I was looking at this, I was like, yeah, there's probably times I've done that. But I think, where everything is your fault, and they don't want to take any responsibility for what has happened, and that can be quite exhausting. So I think the key thing in that is that relationships, there may be toxic patterns and toxic dynamics that can be playing out, and sometimes you may not even notice it. And so I think it's interesting because, for example, I may have a toxic part of a relationship with a friend, but somebody else may not experience that with them. So it's kind of like, what is the dynamic in this relationship, and what is working, what is uplifting me, or what is draining me? And those things that are draining you, is kind of thinking about, what do I do about those? So what I want our listeners to think about is, I want to invite you to think about your own relationships. So,
Mm,
and in your relationships, which ones are healthy, or not healthy? And the ones that are not healthy, why? Why is that happening? And what can you do about it? And I think when you stop and think about it, it can be quite informative. And I call it the unveiling, where you
mm,
start to see the relationship for what it is and how it is, as opposed to what you want it to be. um, I think as human beings, we're quite good pretenders. Oh, it's too hard to have that conversation, I'll just put up with it.
mm.
So yeah.
Yes. Yes, like doesn't Brené Brown say that we go at any length to avoid pain, right?
Yes, exactly, and that's interesting, because even though we do that, I think what happens is that pain, it just gets pushed to later on, and it
Yes.
just becomes bigger. So yeah.
But I think that basically, so far, what I'm getting from you, basically, in what you have explained, about how to recognize this toxic behavior, what is toxic behavior is, and I like these questions that you are putting on the table. Let's think about relationships, and if we identify that actually one particular relationship, has this tint of toxicness. How is this a word? If it does look toxic, then basically, what can you do about it? What do
Yeah.
you want to do about it? Do you want to do something about it? So, in the next sort of part of the podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about how what now sort of deal with these toxic relationships. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we have thought that would be helpful is to kind of put it in three in a little structure for you guys. So um, well, we are looking at two type of big solutions. One, if you are dealing effectively with somebody who is being a little bit toxic with you right now, or you have a particular person that is difficult to deal with, um, what can you do? Is it possible for you to, option one, avoid completely the person, or putting yourself in a situation when you are even with this person, like physically or whatever? So there's two ways to do this, right? Make yourself unavailable, or limit your time together as much as possible, or limit your exposure with this person. Yes.
Yeah.
So this is avoidance. Yes, yes. Like the psychologists out there will say this is avoidance. Yes, yes, yes. It's avoidance. But what we are saying is, like, listen, if you can or you're not ready, right, to face it, because it's also important to do self care and to put yourself first, basically,
Yeah,
right?
actually, Angie, when you were saying avoidance, I was thinking, or is it self-protection? Is it that you're just kind of, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're saying, right? If you're not ready, then
Mm.
it's fine, basically. So that's option one. Now, option two, you cannot avoid the person. Okay, it's Christmas is coming. You're going to be all sitting at that table on Christmas Eve in
Yeah.
continental Europe, or Christmas Day in Anglo-Saxon world, type of thing. So what do you do? So here we were suggesting that you can do a little process, basically, right? So you can, before meeting them, you can prepare yourself, let's say, and we'll give you some kind of solutions, strategies. Then what do you do when you are with them? And then the aftermath.
Sounds
The
like hard work, Angie,
it does, right?
doesn't it? It's like, oh, and you know what I was
But
just
it's worth
thinking,
it.
like, I would hate to feel like people have to, yeah, but I would hate to feel like people have to prepare themselves before they meet me. Like if I was that person for them, yeah.
But yes,
But
but
I
I
think
mean,
it's important.
yes, but that's something to think about, right? And
Yeah.
that's so if we start with the before meeting them, right? So this is if you feel that you really need to prepare yourself, right? Of course, if you don't, if you feel that you deal with it already, there's no problem, right? But you can think about who are the people that you have a tough relationship with or a toxic relationship with. You can be intentional about how you're going to be, right? So like kind of visualize yourself in these situations, like you are at this table having lunch or dinner, and what happens with, like, how am I going to handle it? Yes. um what we were discussing when we were preparing this is that there is a big element of considering what are your boundaries and making a choice about how you feel, you feel, sorry, how you are, do you deserve to be treated. Yes. Don't allow yourself to go into a place that makes you feel again, the way that you usually feel in this situation. Yes. But of course, you bring up the point of you would like to know. And here we had actually put down to think, is it worth talking to them or not? Is it going to make a difference or not? So, what you're saying, Reka, is that you would be open to hear it and be willing to make a change. But are we sure that everybody is the same, though?
Yeah.
I mean, would everybody
You
be
know
the
what's
same?
interesting as you were talking about this?
Mm. Go on.
Yeah, no, what was I saying? So what was interesting when you were talking about this is I've had situations where, I've told somebody that, this behavior, I don't like it, it's not good for me. But it didn't change at all. So now I've gone to, okay, how do I manage when I am with them? What are the things that I can do? What are my boundaries? So it's really interesting because I did try the option of talking to them, giving them feedback, but it just didn't work. So yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, as we know as professionals, and like in coaching, we talk about being coachable, which is really that you're open to hear a different point of view. So obviously,
Yeah.
sometimes when you come to talk to somebody and you tell them, "Oh, this behavior, this thing that you're doing is not working for me," for them, there's no problem because there's like, what's the problem? you know so if they are not open to change, people can change, but they need to be willing to do this
Yeah.
work, and be coachable, be open and to receiving information from others. So yes, so you can prepare yourself, but I think for me, what has really worked out of this for me is to kind of visualize some situation ahead of time, and
Mm,
think, okay, what triggers me about this person, right? um because I know that sooner or later this person will say this or that triggers me. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to behave differently. So with that, I'm going into, okay, so now we are with them, right? So now we
yeah.
arrive, we have arrived with our luggages and things to our Christmas destination. So first of all is about trying to maintain calm, okay? Um, Avoid being reactive or triggered all the time. So this is what I'm saying that, for instance, for me has worked well, basically, So I know that sooner or later there will be the comment that the person makes that makes you go like, what's going on? Where is this comment coming from? So it's okay. It's like, just take it easy. Observe yourself, because now what's different is that you know that this comment is going to come up, right? So now you observe yourself not reacting to the comment. You just
Yeah.
let go. Okay.
The reason I'm laughing is I can just I feel that in my, as I've been in that situation so many times. It's often with my mother. It's like I know it's coming, and it's like, oh,
Yes.
and
I think that mothers or fathers, especially for if
yeah,
you are a woman or if you're a man, this
yeah,
is very yes, it's like there's always that comment that you should have done this, you should have done that. Why didn't you do this? Or why are you like this? Or why are you like that? Or why do you always do this? That always work is like what?
oh
So
my god,
those
oh
comments
that,
are they
yeah.
not wonderful. But it could also be like a brother, a cousin, like
Yeah.
somebody who keeps on bringing up the same stuff. So anyway, so avoid playing into all of this and getting embroiled into that whole, because it becomes like a whole emotional thing.
Yeah.
My children watch these videos of emotional damage. So that's emotional damage, really. So just pay attention at how it makes you feel. Okay, observe your behavior, and you can choose to react differently. Okay, you can choose to give them feedback, as we were saying, if you feel that will make a difference, or you can just let it go and give them feedback later, because sometimes, of
Yeah.
course, for feedback is also important the moment in which you are giving the feedback. Sometimes you cannot, like in the middle of the turkey or whatever, like just say to somebody, like, I have a piece of feedback for you. But you can give them feedback later, maybe when you are alone, especially when people are not heavily intoxicated, probably, as well.
Oh, that's when it all comes out, doesn't it? And it ends up.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
Do
now,
not do that.
by the way, Reka, you could ask me, how do you keep calm and not
Yeah.
react when you are intoxicated yourself, right? So,
It
so
doesn't
yes,
always work. It doesn't always work, Angie.
yes,
Okay.
that could be a bit of a problem as well. But anyway, but you can literally, if you need to say no or remove yourself physically from the situation as well. You could
Yeah.
literally just, say, "Oh, I need a refill," and go and, intoxicate yourself more.
Yeah.
Or
Or,
I need to go and get something from the kitchen or something.
yeah.
Like, if you do need to, you can always remove yourself physically. It's perfectly
Yeah.
fine.
And I
Okay.
think it's good to maybe take some time out and go and take a breath, because it just kind of calms you down. So, yeah,
Yes.
excellent.
But yes, anyway, so as we were saying, don't try to fix them, because at the end of the day, unless they are really kind of willing to hear and they are open. So again, in some of these moments, is not the best time for them to be open and receptive. But definitely people can change. Yes. So we always believe in that. I always believe in people can change, they can develop, they can be a better version of themselves all the time. Yes. All right. So, any other ideas about when we are with them, or we move on to the afterwards?
Well, I think the last one, I don't know if you mentioned it, was exiting the relationship, which I think you talked about
Oh,
earlier,
that's
isn't
it.
it?
Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
afterward. Like
Yeah.
we're getting there. So
Yeah.
after the all these events, basically, you were talking about how for yourself, how to process it has really worked. So maybe you can tell us about this processing. Tell us.
Sorry, what do you mean, Angie?
Oh, when, so after Christmas or Christmas Day has passed, or you're back now home, etc. This is afterwards. So how do you process the experience? What do you do normally?
Oh, well, I guess I think well, it depends actually. I mean, sometimes you might just think you need some space, or one of the things that we talked about is that you may realize that actually one of these relationships is really not good for you. So do you exit it? But I
Mm.
think one of the things that is quite useful is not to hold on to that negative energy. How do you just let it go?
Mm.
Because sometimes, you can go, say you go for dinner or drinks with people, and you're like, oh, she said this, and oh my god, it really annoyed me, and and so you just
Yes,
you let it linger. And I think that's not healthy. It's not healthy for you, it's not
yes,
healthy for the relationship. So the key thing is how do you let it go?
yes,
What do you just kind of say, you know what, that is their stuff, and I'm not going to take it on.
yes.
And there was I don't know where I heard this, but I think swans or ducks do this. So
Mm.
when they have a fight with another duck or another swan, they have this fight and conflict, and then they swim away and they flap their wings. They just flap their wings to get rid of the negative energy. So I guess
Yes,
what would be your version of flapping your wings to just get rid of,
yes.
um, that negativity
Exactly. Is like, how do you move this emotion through you? Because
through you, exactly, and
when
not hold it.
exactly, when we try to not feel the emotion, that's the problem.
Yeah,
But I like this metaphor, or this view of, like this flapping the wings, flapping the sort of negative energy. Leave the stuff in the past, basically, and let's
Yeah.
move forward. So now, moving forward, if you do feel, it could be that actually this is somebody like really close to you that will always be in your life. So we believe in professional help, right? And we believe in, if you do need professional help in the sense of therapy or counseling, that's something that you can consider as well, basically, to really kind of, if you feel that you can work on your side, there's something else that you can work on your side, you can do that. Okay, but also, as you were saying, and this is also like option 3, so option 1 was like avoid them. Option 2 was like, okay, you cannot avoid them, so you have to deal with it. Option 3 is you can always exit a relationship. Okay, let's be clear and honest. Okay, you can. Okay, by the way, you don't need to do a kind of a DEFCON 2 when you exit the relationship, like that is now calling emotional drama. But you can perfectly say, you know what, I reflected about this. What's the value of this relationship in my life? It's not bringing anything in particular. Um, so it's okay. Let it just go, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that
Uh,
can be hard. That can be hard when it's family members.
yes.
I have a couple of family members who've cut off relationships with, either brothers, their parents, and it's because that relationship was just too hard. It was too difficult. So yeah, I think.
I think those stories are in every single family.
Yeah, I know.
We
So
also
anyway,
some of those, but you
yeah,
just, it's okay to let it go if you have to put yourself first,
yeah,
basically.
completely. Yeah.
Okay.
So today
So
we've talked about toxic relationships, which, yeah, I think most of us can relate to. So we've talked about what is a toxic relationship, what are some of the cues that, there may be some toxic behavior going on in the relationship. And, that doesn't mean the whole relationship is bad. You can have a marriage, for example, where there is some toxic behavior, but that doesn't mean the whole relationship is bad. So how do we deal with those aspects? And then, Angie, you talked us through what can we do about it. So I'm hoping you found this episode useful, especially in the run up to Christmas, because often we don't talk about the difficulties. We're like, oh yeah, time of cheer and festivities.
of
But
course we focus
sometimes,
on the positive, like
yeah, but
and
sometimes
by the way, we are excited about Christmas. We are in our Christmas colors,
Christmas
and
colours.
I
But sometimes, relationships can be difficult, and it's okay. It's just kind of owning that and learning from that. So
yes,
yeah, we're wishing you all a wonderful Christmas and a lovely festive season, and hope you have a great start to the new year. And our
yes,
next episode will be focusing for 2023, because it will be at the start of the year. It will be about being intentional for 2023. I do not believe in New Year's resolutions. What I do believe in is being intentional. So we're going to be talking about that. So we hope that you have found this episode useful. Know that you are perfectly human, just the way you are. Don't forget to subscribe and share and like this episode. Yeah, and that's it, really. Anything you want to say, Angie, before we close?
Merry Christmas to everybody.
Yeah. Excellent. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.